I am excited to talk to you because the fun part about being on a podcast is that I get to do research on people like yourself, and you have a very interesting story. So, but one thing I do want to do is take a step back and look at the 3,000-foot view of design, specifically product design, because in my experience with potential students is that there's a misunderstanding of what product design actually is. So, if you can, how would you describe product design to someone who's actually never heard the term before?
Sure. Um, well, first, product design as a term, could easily be matched over for a long time. That was what you referred to if you were designing a physical object,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I'm not one for terminology. It gets a little bit tiring and taxing, and people like love semantics on stuff like that. It's not my thing. But if I were describing digital product design, then to me it is the skill and practice of creating a user interface where people can engage and utilize a web product, a SaaS product, and do so with utility and enjoyment. Um, to accomplish tasks, whether that task is, purchasing something on a store, or if it is taking an action in a web app,
Yeah.
being able to move through an experience in a meaningful way, but also with some enjoyment. I think, that's where brand comes in. So,
Yeah. I agree. The enjoyment part, I completely, I completely agree with because I think we've all been, whether it's in like a physical location or an app or something like that, that feels like super clunky and frustrating. Like it feels like maybe a lot of thought wasn't put into the end user. So the one of the things I wanted to talk to you about as well is your background because you actually started out in fine arts and photography in college, right?
right.
And were you always interested in fine arts and in artistic expression? Was that always your thing?
Yeah, from a very young age, I could draw. And I could run really fast, and I enjoyed that, but I didn't have a family that emphasized team sports, so I didn't get into any of that. And then because I became really effective at drawing, and I found some attention and some appreciation for who I was in that space, I just doubled down. So I think at second grade, I won the logo contest for the whole school for the logo for the school, um, and then in junior high, just accelerated quickly and had some really strong work that I created, and then in high school won a bunch of awards, in both fine art and design, and that was just a fantastic experience for me, and I wanted to keep doubling down in art. But it was in college where I worked. I got to study under a guy named Richard DeVore, who is deceased now, but he had pieces. I'm sure they're still there in the Louvre, in the Met,
Oh
in the
wow.
MoMA. Um, he had been taught by professors that had come out of the Bauhaus in Germany and had left Germany in what's called the diaspora when they were, basically running from Nazis. And and they landed at two schools primarily in the United States: Black Mountain College in North Carolina, and then Cranbrook College. And my professor was at Cranbrook, so he was taught by those professors, and then he taught me, and he taught me the visual language. So, I learned the visual language through the medium of ceramics and pottery, and the visual language can be defined as, the elements that help me as an artist or a visual creator to communicate with effect what I intend to communicate. And so, A horizontal line creates stability. A diagonal line creates activation and energy. Um, Sharp lines can connote danger, and fluid lines can connote, rest or safety or relaxation or peace. Um, there's colors and the way that they affect us. And this um, experience can be something that people experience outside of just culture.
Mhm.
So there's a great book called by Rudolf Arnheim called Art and Perception: The Psychology of the Creative Eye,
Mm.
and that book gets into some really great material about how human beings perceive line, shape, form, texture, contrast, all of these things, and then how they apply meaning to it. So, for
Mm.
instance, um, imagine a square space defined by a border, and then you have a dot. And if you place that dot in the center, in the absolute center of that framed square,
Mhm.
consistently through psychological testing, uh, users will say that that dot is in stasis. It's not moving. Meaning, if you were to, create a sense that, this dot is either moving or it's still, which one is it? Asks the psychologist, and the person responds, "Well, it's still." And given, and then the other opportunity is for, if you move that dot just a little bit to the right, there's a
Mm.
sensation that it's moving right. If you put that dot close to the edge on the right side, depending on how close to the edge it is, people now feel that it's moving away from the edge.
Mm.
Those, and this is a still image, this is not, nothing of motion. So that, once you begin to understand these elements as a fine artist, you can create meaning, right?
Mm.
You can create posters, you can create art that communicates intensity, violence, fear, rest, warmth, confusion, or safety. There's all kinds of different emotions that you can draw up to
Yeah.
borrow from cultural mediums, but also to apply this visual language.
Yeah.
Well, fast forward, and I started, trying to figure out how to apply that visual language to web design after I went and tried to get my master's in fine art at the Tyler School of Art and Design in New Jersey. And they
Mhm.
only, I think they had something like 3,000 applicants a year, and they accepted 4 students a year.
4?
Uh, 4. Uh, and so I didn't get in. No wonder. I think I was, it was in the mix, but I didn't get in, and I was sort of disheartened by that. And
Mhm.
we had a new child on the way, and I started thinking, "Huh, what am I going to do?"
Mm.
And at the time, there was a blogging platform called Blogger. It was the first real blogging platform, and this is before Google owned it. And all of
Mhm.
the templates were in CSS, and so you could go in and manipulate the CSS. And people like Dan Cederholm and Doug Bowman, Verla Peters, John Hicks, others had created these templates. These were my heroes at the time. Um, uh, and I started manipulating these templates and figured out how to do it. And I thought, well, maybe I can make a website if I can do this,
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was, for me, it started in fine art though. And
Yeah.
actually, some of my favorite designers out there in the space, people like Aaron Walter and Dan Rubin. Many of them have fine art backgrounds, like I do, and I think that it does something to you to learn those, the visual language, or just to come at design from a different perspective.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, but I love it, and someday I'd like to return to it. The last thing I'll tell you about that is I
Mhm.
got really into conceptual art, and maybe Bob Ross. big
Ah,
afro,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
paints happy trees.
yeah.
So in college, one of the things that I got into was this piece where you're listening to what he's saying in one of his shows, and you can read everything that he's saying written out on the wall, but you don't see the visuals. And so, as you're perceiving what he's saying, your own mind is mapping out what it looks like. And either you understand Bob Ross and you know the cultural medium, or you don't. But either way, there's a whole span of like what you create from that listening and reading is different than what I create, and I find that beautiful, that
Yeah,
as a receiver we are a participant in the authorial experience of art. And that's true of design as well, and product design, is that there isn't a one concrete experience. um, Neither is there total subjectivity, and I think in between those two is art and design.
yeah.
Design being the less subjective, art being more subjective.
Right.
So it's a
Yeah.
fun journey, man. I love being on it.
Yeah, I that's the one thing that I've noticed is that designers are very passionate, and there's a depth to their understanding of psychology, human behavior, and obviously the artistic how art impacts those different mediums. Do you think that it's worthwhile for everyone considering a design path to go down that rabbit hole of understanding the psychology behind the art?
It's a good question. It depends on what kind of designer you want to be. I think to be honest, I'd say that of people that work in our field that call themselves designers, I would probably say that more than half are what I would refer to as stylists. Um, and they would probably take offense that I said that, but I feel that there are many people who call themselves designers who are good at style, and better than most. And styling is a real thing of skill, to figure out a really cool graphic design.
Yeah.
Um, to be a designer, in my estimation, really is truly to be a Renaissance person. It's to know the psychology behind what you're designing enough. You can go way down that rabbit hole, and that's really cool. Some people who are, UX designers, or information architects, have some incredible facility and agency around psychology, and I truly respect that. The kind of designer that I aspire to be, and that the ones that I appreciate the most, I think of them as Renaissance people who are, good enough at psychology and good enough at uh, styling, but their love is pulling all those things together into a cohesive whole that is very useful for the individual who is using the product and the company. So for me, the thing that I landed on after years of trying a lot of things is, uh, I design relationships between people and companies that drive human positive impact. So I like creating that relationship between the person and the company through brand, through usefulness, through value. So if the person is coming and is able to utilize a product and gets benefit from that and is willing to exchange that benefit for some monetary value, or for their email address, or for some other, barter of exchange, I just love that. Like, that feels so good. I get charged up about that. And to me, the people who are the best at that are capable of understanding enough psychology, enough, user experience, enough information architecture, but also they can write. They understand how to use language to accomplish a goal. Those are the people that I follow and aspire to be like.
I want to double tap on the psychology thing again, because as I was doing some research on you and I was listening to some of the podcasts you've done in the past, one thing that's pretty evident is that the stuff you had to grow from and overcome personally has really impacted your work. And
Yep.
I'm wondering, with in a space as a designer where your core function is really reliant on understanding your stakeholders, understanding your audience so well. Uh, do you think it's really helpful for designers to do the work on themselves because it ultimately helps them understand human behavior? Ultimately helps them empathize with the end consumer and actually makes them into a better designer.
That's a great question. Um, the way I would put it is this: the reasons you should work on yourself probably are not related first to design,
Right,
right?
right.
Meaning, you should work on yourself because you have the opportunity to experience a much more joyful life with far less capacity for suffering. So, the way I like to think about it is that, and what I've been taught is that pain is a certainty, but suffering is optional. Um, Suffering is pain times resistance. So
Ooh,
when we resist suffering, that's when things get hard. That's when things get
wow,
rough, right?
wow.
Um, and so that's the opportunity, is to learn to accept life as it is, ourselves as we are, other people as they are, develop boundaries, but figure out, how to move more fluidly in life. Now, for me, I had to quit drinking before I could think about life in those terms, right? Drinking was polluting my mind and creating a system in my body where I could not respond from my prefrontal cortex. I was spending all my time in my amygdala. My limbic system was jacked up, and I was, constantly reacting to everything. So until I, took care to, get off alcohol, I wasn't going to make any good decisions. That's going to be true for a lot of people, whether it's alcohol or obsession with food or obsession with porn or like whatever it is that like gets their dopamine hit, and keeps them out of reality. Like that's the first thing. So how does that translate to design? Well, today I'll tell you a few anecdotes. So today I can think about other people, my clients, the end user, the end person experiencing sites that I develop, um, and I can utilize something that I've learned about called nonviolent communication, and just what I've learned about empathy to really wonder what is it in their lives that is difficult or challenging or frustrating or um, what's happening in their experience. From that vantage, I have a much better perspective to be able to create something of value for them. So it might be, if, like, when I was chief creative officer at Relay Foods, most of our customers were middle-aged women with multiple kids. Why did they want online grocery? Because going to the grocery store sucks with kids. It's super hard. Like, it's
Right,
really difficult.
right.
It can be, once they get to a certain age, it can be like, all right, you go get the
Yeah,
milk, you yogurt and cheese, whatever.
yeah.
Um, but when they're young, especially, it's really challenging. Okay, how can we meet them in that experience, and how can we, by knowing them better, make this user experience something that not only gets the job done with the groceries, but also maybe meets them in their moment of like, we really hope that we've served you well today, saved you some time and a little bit of relief from your, stressful day,
Yeah.
your friends at Relay Foods. And then let's say that we made a mistake in their order, because it happens. Then having world class customer service that follows up and uses a specific tone of voice, maybe delivers something in a bag that like is well designed and thoughtful. Maybe there's something on the bottom of the bag that's like, oh my God, are you looking at my bottom? It's a cute little moment. But like all those little things are
Yeah.
part of experience, right? A designer isn't just about visual things, it's experience.
Right.
And that experience is what, if you know what's going on in you, you're much more capable of knowing what's going on in others and guessing and or asking, and then, delivering on a valuable experience for them. So, again, people should get healthy because, they're going to cause less suffering. Um,
Absolutely.
you know, Putin is unhealthy. He's causing an untold amount of suffering, but
Absolutely.
he's also a human being, and he also has needs and feelings and things like that.
Right.
My guess is he's got a bunch of, pent up trauma that he's working out on an entire people group. That's
Right.
really screwed up. Now, most of us don't have that kind of power, but we can hurt others, including our users. Like the kind of decisions that get made at some large corporations with social apps that don't serve users very well. My guess is that the people behind those are not very healed, healthy people.
Right.
I think they're making decisions that harm others. So if we want to make better decisions and improve people's lives as designers, yeah, I think getting healthy can help with that.
I agree 100%. And yes, people should get healthy for themselves, number one, but it doesn't help that it does help you as a designer.
Totally.
I, as you were saying that, I actually thought about a restaurant experience that I had probably like a couple days ago over the weekend. And it was so great. When you're in a setting and it feels like they're anticipating every need that you have and they're hitting every single note. That's sort of what I think of when I think of like a well-designed experience, um, which pivots me to really good emails that you created over the course of a weekend, which was, I was like, that's insane. You
I
started out
mean,
with
not the
20,
current product, the
not the
original
current
version.
product, just the first 20 emails, first 20 emails created over a weekend. And you started out with 20 curated best in class emails. And I'm curious about why emails, why were you motivated to start uh, a best in class email company?
You know, um, here's what it was for me. So let's see, it's 8 years old. So, I started in 2014, probably around 2008, 9, 10, somewhere in there. I had created a product called Pattern Tap. And it was, if you talk to other old school people on the web, they're like, oh, yeah, Pattern Tap, man. Like it was back in the day. But
Yeah.
basically, it was, thousands of screenshots of a list, a header, a footer, articles, links, you name it. It was just ways that people designed all those things. And in some ways it was like UX, but a lot of it was just like, how are people doing like fly out navs and this side navs? And, it's just inspiration to help you think. Whereas, and this was pre Pinterest, and you had web galleries, but then in the web gallery you're looking through the entire site. Like I just want to see 100 navs right in front of me to give me like sparks of ideas.
Yeah.
So I had done all this work to create that, um, and bartered away a bunch of my design and hired a developer to work with me on that and all that kind of stuff. And it went great, but it was very expensive, and it just took a lot of my energy. And so in the end, I think I was maybe making $1,000 a month on sponsorship, and I sold it for like 25 grand. And that was just, it was sort of a disappointing outcome. Um, and so, fast forward a few years, and I had been on two different VC backed startups as, the design leader on these teams. And I saw how important email was to like the customer experience, the product experience. And I couldn't believe that there was nothing out there that just showcased emails. There were all these other products that did that for web. Why not email? I did not ever think, you know what, I want to start as an email company. No way, man. Like that's not my jam, dude,
Yeah.
but I'm good at spotting problems. I'm good at spotting gaps in the marketplace, things that people aren't, fitting within my space anyway, like
Hmm. Hmm.
within my area of influence. And
Right.
so um I knew that I could whip up something really fast on WordPress, get a bunch of little emails in there, and I could get MailChimp to sponsor it. And I just wanted to see if I could, as short a time as possible, be making some passive income.
Got
And,
you.
out of the gate, I got MailChimp. I sent them an email. My friend Mark DiChristina, hey dude, can you sponsor this? This is pretty cool. Really good email. Good name, right? And he responds with the GIF and meme from Jerry Maguire that just said, "You had me at hello," and that was great. So that's a fun backstory. But yeah, we just went from there. We developed a newsletter, and now last in 2021 we had 2.2 million unique users
Wow.
on the site. Um, and then our email list now is like 95,000 people.
Wow.
And, it's just been a wild year discussing either investment or acquisition and all kinds of opportunities. So
Man.
it's not, none of us are full time on it. We're all still spending about 10% of our time on that, and all have full time jobs. But it makes a good chunk of change for advertising, and then we've just been pouring that back into the product every year. So it's been an interesting journey. But no, I didn't think I'd start an email company, and I still am not totally comfortable being famous for email. But whatever, what do you do?
When I saw the title, I mean the name of the company, I personally love when you see the title of a company and you know exactly what they do. That, I mean, really good emails. There's nothing left to explain. It's pretty much it's all there, right? Uh
Totally.
the the thing that's interesting about focusing on world class emails is, as a consumer, as someone that gets 100 emails a day from people trying to get money from me, the thing that troubles me the most is that with email, it feels like most companies are checking a box, as in they're just sending you this thing. You're a part of a workflow, and they're just sending you this thing because you check the box in their workflow and then they send it out. It's always, to me, most emails are obvious and transparent in the bad way where it's obvious you're just trying to make money
Right.
off of me. You're not concerned with the value that you
Yep.
could provide to my life. And when you think of how much money or how much more progress a company can make if they were value focused, why is it that companies don't prioritize that? Is it because like value is hard to scale? Is what do you think about that?
The way you phrase that is an astute question. We think about this a lot. My perspective, my experience is that people don't do this for a couple of reasons. One is that you can you can actually get reasonable return on investment from just being hard sales and just going in and trying to get sales
Right.
done.
Right.
That can be enough. Um, and I think that because that does happen from here and there, then it means that um, some people don't know how to take that next step. They don't know how to up the ante. Um, the other is that people just don't know better, and they're missing a brand opportunity, right? So branding in general in this space can be challenging. A lot of people think about brand as like a logo and your colors, and
Right.
that's all part of your identity. But your brand is like what people's gut feeling is about you, right? And that's going to come through. So if somebody's trying to sell something really hard to me, at the door, like, dude, really? No, thank you. Like,
Right.
this is not like, hey, I'm in the middle of dinner. What are you doing?
Right.
That kind of stuff, right?
Right.
Versus somebody who's a little more thoughtful and aware of what's going on, and comes and says, hey, Mr. Smith, I noticed that you've had some lawn folks over, the last 3 or 4 times I've driven by, and I would really enjoy the opportunity to have your business. Are you exceedingly happy with your lawn team? Are they always on time? Are they always clean and respectful? They're okay. Well, I would like to do, something better for you. And I'd like to just meet their current prices. Would that be interesting to you? Yeah. Okay, let's go. Like,
Right.
somebody who paid attention, noticed, asked good questions, got to know me, led with, questions and curiosity. That makes a huge difference.
Right.
Now, we know this relationally. So I say that email is relationship delivered, or sometimes I'll say email is product delivered. And we know this like in our product design, right? To utilize, better question asking
Yeah.
rather than leading with assumptions. But for some reason, email is this space. It's because it has such good traction, and right now too, um, the journey you have to go through to get an email sequence set up is really, it's long and
Yeah.
arduous, and the learning curve from getting an email sequence set up to actually being performant and thoughtful and engaging, it's not a small lift. And so
Yeah.
I think that people run out of steam and energy to do it well. I mean, we would like to improve our email game, but again, we're all part-time, so
Yeah.
it's like, how can we have here's something, actually, an anecdote that it might be helpful for your listeners. um, the way to scale quality is by maintaining scope, and being thoughtful about scope. So the way I like to think about it is, I'm a Led Zeppelin fan, and you can have one person on a guitar, in a bar or like at a small venue, um, and for like 2 or 3 hours, you could pay them on, again, just like an acoustic guitar and a mic. You could probably pay them 500 or $1,000 for like a good couple of hours, you and your friends, that kind of a thing. That'd be a great experience. Hell yeah. If they're good at playing one person, boom, that's awesome. Or you could have somebody doing Led Zeppelin covers at, like, as an orchestra, 35 instruments, showing up at a music hall, and it's just super dialed in. That's going to cost $750,000. That's crazy. It's going to be off the charts amazing. Now, both experiences were quality.
Right.
It was just different expression, different needs, all that kind of stuff. So most of the time, what I find in product design and in email design is most people try and do too much, and that's where the quality goes down. You can't spread your bandwidth and your strength, your resources across that much and consistently expect quality. So
Right.
in order to keep it small, you need to reduce.
Yeah.
um, Generally, most people try and do too much, and they add too much design finesse into a product. Doing something simpler and just being basic, like, look at Craigslist.
Oh
This
man.
what a piece in so many
Man.
ways, and yet it still works so well. Like, I've never once thought, how do I use this? Like, it doesn't look bad, or sorry, it doesn't look good, but
Yeah.
it works. And I used to think, oh man, we need to redesign Craigslist. And yeah, like, just a little bit better grid or typography could make
Yeah.
a huge difference. But it just works. It just gets out of the way. The other thing is, if it starts to look too good, then there's like a quality of, you have different expectations from something like
Right.
that, right? So,
Yeah.
like, for instance, if you're trying to buy cheap pizza because you're in college and you're just like, I just want bad bread, bad cheese, I just want to, like, throw this down my throat. at like 2 in the morning and
Right.
watch, some bozo film. Um, you don't want a pizza flyer that looks like, bespoke pizza wood fired and all
Yeah.
that. No, you want like something that's been printed on neon paper and it's been Xeroxed 165 times. And you're like, I can barely read this, but I think that this is the jam right here. Like you've got to communicate to your audience. That's design too. Design isn't just about making things look better, right? That's a mistake that, again, stylists make.
Mm.
So
Design is about communication. It's about
it really
communication.
is.
The
Yeah, and to me, design is about relationship. So how is relationship done? It's done through communication, but it's not like a lot of people think about communication as out. These things, we got two ears, one mouth, use these twice as much, and it's that listening. And listening isn't enough. You have to be curious.
mm,
My favorite designers are curious. And curiosity, I think, is the greatest human superpower that any of us can bring to the table.
right.
So back to psychology and personal health. I've had two of the most difficult and challenging months of my life. Just absolutely stressed, balls to the wall, going on all different fronts, and personal life, like good stuff happening in my life, but just a lot. And um, through the experiences that I've been through, I was able to meet these obstacles and just stay curious. How do I want my life to change so that maybe I'm not experiencing this again in a year? What can I learn from this, or that would be a spiritual experience? This is really uncomfortable. I don't think about things as bad or good anymore. It's more like, what do I want this thing to teach me? And that perspective can be used in design as well. This client is experiencing a lot of frustration, and they're becoming annoying to me. What's going on? How can I learn? How can I address their needs? Uh, what might they be experiencing that I'm not understanding? These users are acting in this way. Interesting. To me, it feels obvious to do this other thing, but obviously it's not obvious,
Yeah.
or they would be doing that. So, how can I approach this with curiosity
Right.
and that openness to be wrong, to make mistakes, to have micro failures, so that you can create. To me, failure is a misnomer. It's just education.
Yeah.
And if you're learning, if
Yeah.
if you don't learn, then maybe it is a failure. But if you can stay curious, you can always grow.
I agree. And I was talking to someone else about product design, and I said, in my conversations with people from design, and you can tell me if I need a bigger sample pool because I'm way off on this. My experience is that designers have the good designers, I'll say, have the least amount of ego. They
Hmm.
leave their ego at the door because the design isn't about them,
Right.
unless it's their design. It's not about them. Am I on track with that?
I would say it is correlated but not causal.
Mm,
So I don't think that like low ego produces a good designer. I think that there are a lot of good designers who do have low egos, who are people who've, you don't have a reduced ego without experiencing some suffering in your life, and it's through that suffering I think people grow. But I will say that there's an interesting balance. So low ego can be perceived as being very flexible. One of the things that I've learned is that it's important to me that I work with clients who trust what experience I'm coming with, and I trust their experience. So these days, the design firm that I run is called Bunsen, and we are designing brand and communication for biotech, life sciences, deep tech, because these are the most important problems to solve in our age.
mm,
And if they don't get solved, there's some serious consequences coming down the pipeline. A good example would be one of our clients is working on a solution to deliver protection from antimicrobial resistant bacteria, where if those bacteria succeed, by the year 2050, 10 million people per year will be dying. That's like
Wow.
New York City every year.
Wow.
And it's because antibiotics are ceasing to be effective because we've overused them. And not just like the kind we take, when we're sick, but we put antibiotics in everything. And so we help them with a brand and choice careful words so that they can go out and raise more money, get the team that they need, build something that then can, save us. So being able to deliver on some of those promises, what is needed for me is I need to respect that they know their science, and I want them to respect that if we establish common goals together, I am really experienced at knowing how to go achieve those goals for you with brand, voice, visuals, design, etc. Um, so if they don't like that, that's fine.
Yeah.
You should work with someone else.
Right.
Like in that sense, like I'm not hurt by that.
Hmm.
My ego is not involved in that, but I am not like that is a boundary where I'm not interested in working with people that are like, well, I don't like that color because it reminds me of my ex-wife.
Yeah.
Cool. This has nothing to do with your audience. Like,
Yeah.
go home. So it's interesting. To me, the best designers do have low ego, but they are clear and certain and understand their skill sets and their experience or lack thereof. And they're honest about that and authentic about that, transparent about that, but also able to have strong boundaries about, where they end and the client starts or the customer starts or the user starts. And again, approaching that with curiosity always, but uh, my favorite designers are people who are certain, like you know who they are.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually, that was actually my next question, because in design, when you're designing for other people, is it hard to have a quote unquote style? Like, does
Mm.
Matthew Smith have a style that when you see something that you don't even know who did it, but when you look at it, you read it or something, you're like, oh, that sounds like Matthew Smith?
It's interesting. I propose to my clients I don't have a style,
Hmm.
but I do.
Yeah.
um if you look at really good emails brand, like that's just got a ton of personality.
Yeah.
If you go back and you look at where the whale comes from and Squared Eye, my original design studio, it's just got a ton of personality. Like I'm a loud person. I'm a big personality. Hopefully I've become a better listener over time. I sure hope so. I know I have. But big personal stuff. But I think if you talk to my clients, they would tell you over and over, um, Matthew knew how to fight for what our goals were, and I know how to write. I know how to communicate. I know how to communicate what the design is doing so that my client doesn't have to be a designer,
Yeah.
right? So whether it's a client or a product team, like I don't expect the engineers necessarily to know design. They might,
Hmm.
or the C suite might know design, but I want to help them understand, no, we made this angle here because in the background, we wanted to create more of a storyline and some activation. All the horizontals felt very static.
Mm.
Everything was still and there wasn't any movement. And our brand is all about energy and excitement and
Right.
enjoyment. Like I'm making this up, but you get the
Hmm.
idea.
Yep.
So, you know, being able to communicate, it's not enough to be like, well, I think it looks cool.
Yeah.
Like you've got to be able to explain, and unless you know the visual language, you can't do that. So again, Art and Visual Perception is a great book. Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud is another great book
Mm,
to really, communicate and understand visual language and help other people to understand it. Uh, Brand Gap is a great one for, people that are outside of design to understand brand and the power of brand. So
nice. I love those recommendations. We'll put it
cool.
down in the comments for sure. Uh, a question about storytelling, because Bunsen, where you talked about you develop brand communications for science companies, right? Um, it's described as we help science tell better stories. And when I talk to designers, when I listen to presentations from designers or some of our workshops here at Flatiron School, the one thing that's evident is they're always taking you on this journey. It always feels like you're the only thing they're missing is once upon a time. Like it always feels like this really beautiful, elegant, well thought out story that they're taking you on. Can you talk a little bit about the role that storytelling plays in product design?
So I think one of the best places for this would be Zarly, one of the first startups that I was a part of. That we developed a full product suite. It was more or less at the time that I was there, anyway. And this your colleague Matt Donovan that's where I met
Hey,
him.
nice.
Um, so um, what we were doing there was we were trying to create a marketplace. And, out at the time, you have places like Craigslist. Facebook Marketplace was out there a little bit. Generally, it was very cut and dry, very transactional. And we wanted Zarly to be a place of relationship and fun and enjoyment. And so creating a brand story there where people felt these little moments of joy and interaction came in a lot of ways. So one, most people, when you're in the app, there was a geographic component. You wanted to do things like you would ask, can somebody deliver, 10 cups of coffee to me and my office mates in the next 2 hours, for this amount of money? And so there was a map component. Well, instead of the map being your traditional, tan with, yellow and red lines and things like that, we found a way to color our map blue along the lines of um, our brand. And that was really, like that was me leading that direction and feeling like that's part of like creating this, storyline. And then when you would post, your first Zarly, you'd get this little character. We ended up calling them the Booyah Boy, but it was very illustratorly, not what you think of as product design. It had a very kind of like children's book feeling, but it was these moments that it softened people. It helped people feel more relaxed. That kind of storyline can really be helpful. Now, what I will say is the people that are fantastic at UX, my favorite UX folks know how to understand the customer really well and create this story arc where they go from something being frustrating or like not working to the app being able to be introduced to solve that problem, and then through the story arc toward the solution, and then repeating that, and potentially involving even like viral loops and things like that, where you look for opportunities to engage other people that feel fluid and have low friction. That, if you can master that story and then do that in a way that engages the customer in their own personal story, that's where things get pretty interesting. But you need to understand your role in the story to begin with. So
Mm,
a lot of people should be looking at like brand archetypes and stuff like that. So for really good emails, for instance, we recognize that we're the Yoda in the story. We are not the hero. So we think
mm,
about our audience as the Lukes and Leias and Rays, and we want them to succeed. And so we want to empower them, encourage them, teach them, educate them, give them insight into their own internal power.
mm,
And that position means that if there's an opportunity for us to come up with our own educational platform where we create our own education, We can do that, or we can curate education that our users are already making. Well, that's an obvious answer. We want to curate because we don't want to compete. We don't want to be a co-hero. We're Yoda.
Right.
And so when we understand our role in the story, then it helps make product decisions.
Mm.
Well, should we go X or Y? Well, which one, puts us in that position of Yoda versus the hero? Oh, well, this one. Okay, yeah, well, let's stay Yoda here. And consistently that brand understanding has meant that we've made better and better decisions to where today our users at Really Good Emails, they always feel supported, encouraged, like they're being championed, um, and and uplifted.
Mm.
And we have rabid stands. It's crazy. People just love Really Good Emails. I don't even understand it, to be honest. It's amazing. So I think that's where brand and product are interlinked.
Yeah.
These things they aren't separate.
Yeah. I love that because you, as a company, you know what you are and you know what you aren't. And when you are crystal clear on that vision, it makes it so much easier for the fans to understand exactly where they stand and where you stand in their life, what position that you play in their life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
As we near the end here, there's a question that we ask each one of our guests because the answer is always very interesting. And you have dropped a lot of gems in this episode, so I know this one is going to be good. Are you ready for the question?
Go for it.
All right. Matthew Smith, what is a quote that you personally live by?
One of my all-time favorite quotes is by Maya Angelou. Um, People don't remember what you said. People don't remember what you did. They remember how you made them feel.
Mm.
Yeah, that's one that I think about all the time. Um, we as people are our memory is tied into our body, so we have our neural pathways are not all up here. They're
Mm.
all strewn throughout our body. There's more and more evidence. If you read The Body Keeps the Score, it's a fantastic book about trauma and neuroscience and neuroplasticity, and it really helps you understand like all of our memories throughout our lives, trauma or not, like they get stored in our bodies and we can process those memories. But whether it's like the deep warmth and connection and safety and comfort and appreciation that we feel through a brand or through a product or through a friend or through a relative, or if it's the shame, confusion, fear, um, belittling, the gaslighting, the amount of gaslighting that happens from product to user is absurd,
Mm.
where people make users feel like it's their fault, right?
Hmm.
So when we think about how can we make other people feel wonderful, there's so many opportunities. A good example is the other day, Really Good Email sends out 2 emails a week on our newsletter. And when everything started ramping up with Ukraine, I think it was day 3 of the war, and it was time for our normal send, and it just wasn't appropriate to send that. And so, as was the case during a lot of the Black Lives Matter movement, or during some of the pandemic work or the pandemic things that were happening, we just paused what we normally do, send out our email that's full of marketing information, etc. And I write like a personal note, and this one was basically me saying, this just sucks. This is awful. I don't know what to do. I feel lost. I feel confused. I feel vulnerable. Can you imagine how the people in the Ukraine feel? Why don't you stop with me just for a moment? Let's all put our hands on our hearts. I led them through, I wrote it, but I led them through a loving kindness meditation, and then the hope was that maybe each of us having just a little more peace in our own hearts has a net effect of, sending that downstream, and that it helps, reduce the potential of the next war, or some micro war between colleagues or
Right.
family or whatever it is.
Right.
Well, that I got hundreds of responses. It was crazy, and to me, it just seemed like the right thing to do. But
Yeah.
it was deeply meaningful to other people
Yeah.
to just pause, and because why? Because I care about how people feel.
Right.
That's how I'm set up. That's
Yeah.
not everybody has that framework, but I do. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Man.
Jelani, it's been a real pleasure today, and I'm excited to see where all this is going for you. So.
Man, I appreciate you so much, man. Thank you for dropping all these jewels on this episode. If you made it this far in episode, we appreciate you. Please like, subscribe, tell your cousin, throw it in the group chat, please. But with that, we are out.